Is our world supposed to be like this? Or is something wrong? I mean, why is it that so many of us have this sense deep down that something is seriously out of whack? I mean, we see the violence and injustice and disease in the world, and something within us says that this is not how things are supposed to be. I mean, how is it that our world can be filled with such beauty and such order and such good, and yet at the same time filled with such heartache and such pain? And how can all of these things exist side by side in the same place at the same time? Now, the first book in the Bible is a book called Genesis. And Genesis is a book of origins. It's a story of how we came to find ourselves in the world that we know to be our home. Genesis begins by saying that God created the heavens and the earth. And that after he created the heavens and the earth, he created the first human beings, Adam and Eve. And that he placed them in this beautiful garden that Genesis calls Eden. And Eden was perfect. It had these rivers running through it. We're given all sorts of other details. We're told that in this Garden of Eden, God gave Adam and Eve meaningful, significant work, that they somehow partnered with him in caring for this world that he had placed them in. And we're told that there was some sort of peace and harmony between human beings, between Adam and Eve, and between humans and God. Now, we're told that in this garden was a tree called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. See, God has such respect for his creation, for his creatures, that would be us, that he lets us live however we want. We can live how he created us to live, or we can make up our own rules and live however we want. God never, ever forces himself on anybody. God says, you can live how you want, or you can live how I created you to live. It's almost as if God says, it's your choice. It's still our choice. I mean, maybe the truth of the Adam and Eve story, maybe the greatest power of the story is not so much that it happened, but that it happens. This is how the story begins. Now, at the end of the Bible is a book called Revelation. Revelation, as the last book in the Bible, tells how everything ends. And at the end, God says, hey, I'm making all things new. It's kind of a strange beginning. But at the end of all things, God says he creates a new heaven and a new earth. And at the end of Revelation, we're given these details about what this new heaven and this new earth are going to be like. We're told that there are going to be rivers running through. We're told that there will be the healing of the nations, which means that we'll all get along. We're told that we'll actively participate with God in taking care of the world that we find ourselves in. It says there'll be peace with each other, but that there'll be peace and harmony with God. And in the middle of it all will be a tree. If that's how it ends, and Genesis is how it begins, then we have to ask the question, do we live between the trees? If that's the case, then this life is like a blip on the radar screen of eternity. God always has been. He's gone on forever into the past. And he goes on forever into the future. His reality has always existed and always will exist. And for a brief period of time, we live between the trees. But if this life is like a blip, I mean, if it's just here and temporary and just a moment and then we're gone, I mean, what's the point? What's the purpose to all this? You see, some people divide reality up into chunks. There's like this life, the life that you and I know, and then we'll die and we kind of start over somewhere else. There's this chunk of reality, and then there's like another chunk out there somewhere after this place. And so what happens is we end up falling into this belief that somehow we'll just start over, that I'll just end up when I die in some new world, and then I'll get a new driver's license and a change of address, and then I'll just kind of start over with a blank slate, and we'll see what it's like and figure it out from there. Maybe religious people sometimes are guilty of pushing this kind of view. Recently, I had this rental car, and I was driving around, and I couldn't get my radio to turn off. I could not find the off button. It was driving me crazy. And I ended up listening to this Christian radio preacher, a really well-known personality, and he was talking about the end of the world, essentially, and he was saying that Jesus is going to come back, is going to fix this place, and that some great things are going to happen someday. And so the point of the message, what I could gather, was that to be a Christian was to be hoping and waiting for that day. Hoping and waiting. Now, I believe God is going to do something with the world. And I believe that He has this all figured out, and that somehow in Jesus He retells our story, and that somehow things get repaired and restored in some beautiful, amazing way at the end of time. But hoping and waiting, I mean, is that it? Are we just hanging around until some future date when something great happens, and then we kind of get on from there? I need a God who's now. I need a God who teaches me how to live now. I need a faith that's about today, that helps me understand the world that I live in today. The world that you and I know is here and now, and the place, earth, that we call home. I need to know how to live here and find meaning and purpose today. This is my understanding of Jesus' message. My understanding of Jesus' message is He teaches us to live in the reality of God now, here, and today. It's almost as if Jesus just keeps saying, change your life. Live this way. I mean, where does beauty come from? I mean, is there anybody that you find captivating? I mean, who made them? I mean, who invented art and music? I mean, who invented laughter? Who thought all this up? I mean, beauty and wonder and awe. I mean, where does it come from? We live between the trees in a world drenched in God. And some people seriously ask, where is God? Maybe a better question would be, where isn't God? I mean, His fingerprints are all over our world. Or maybe it's His world and they're our fingerprints. Now, why would a being who put this place in motion, I mean, if there's a source to this, if there's somebody who cooked up all that is good and true and right and beautiful, why would this being hide Himself? I mean, why would it be hard to get to know this God? In Isaiah, God says, it's not like I've spoken in secret, or that you seek me in vain. In the book of Acts, God even says, you seek Him, and you reach out for Him, and you'll find Him. Now, some people see faith as like a ticket. It's like, if you believe the right things, and if you nod your head at the right time, then when you leave, you get to go to a better place. And so, essentially, faith becomes a bit like fire insurance. It's like a guarantee that something bad won't happen to me someday. And so, essentially, this life is like a waiting room for the next place, and there becomes no real point to this life except for getting people to believe like I do and convincing them that they need to be like me and we'll all go to the same place. Essentially, what ends up happening is people are just hanging out and waiting. But what good is a faith that doesn't really have anything to do with how we live today and the world that we find ourselves in now? These are exactly the kind of beliefs, the kinds of systems of thought that Jesus confronts when He teaches His followers, His disciples, that they're going to live forever. He calls disciples because they're students. They're learning how to be a certain kind of force, a certain kind of presence for good in the world. They're working with God to overcome evil with good. They're working to be people of peace and people of justice, people of mercy and grace. Followers of Jesus are people who are committed to partnering with God to make this world, the world that we all live in, the kind of place that God originally intended it to be. In Jesus' precise words, we're learning to love each other as we love ourselves. A follower of Jesus is somebody who's living, and they're never going to stop living. There's this ancient Jewish saying that a person's good deeds are used by God as seeds to plant the very trees of Eden. And that you and I enter into this kind of relationship with God, the very trees of paradise are being planted. May you trust Jesus when he says that death has been taken care of and that you can live forever with God, that you're never, ever, ever going to stop living. May you believe that death has been taken care of and that you can be a partner with God in redeeming and restoring this fallen, broken, hurting world. That you can literally be a partner with God in making this the kind of place that God originally intended it to be. May you be the kind of person who, when you live this way, the very trees of paradise are being planted.